Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a completely objective, highly structured look at a recent and, honestly, really charged broadcast from Blaze TV. We're going to break down their exact analysis of the intense and frankly often disturbing relationship between media rhetoric and real-world political violence. So whether you follow this topic obsessively or you're just kind of curious about the underlying mechanics of political messaging, we're going to lay out their arguments for you step by step. Because the original broadcast is such a sprawling conversation, we've structured it into 5 distinct thematic pillars to make it super easy to follow. We'll start with the core thesis on rhetoric, move right into dissecting the shooter's manifesto, analyze that tense 60 minutes exchange, look at the media fallout, and finally, examine extreme online voices.
All right, Section 1, Rhetoric and Political Violence, the core thesis.
So, the foundational argument from the Blaze TV hosts is laid out perfectly right here. They firmly believe that hostile language from the mainstream media directly fuels violent, real-world acts. They argue that constantly labeling someone like Donald Trump with extreme terms, specifically words like traitor, rapist, or pedophile, well, they say that has deadly consequences. And obviously, actual pedophilia is a horrific crime that we all absolutely condemn. But the hosts are arguing that weaponizing these specific labels in politics doesn't just vanish into thin air. It literally puts a target on people's backs. It creates an environment where even Secret Service agents are put at lethal risk.
Moving on to Section 2, Dissecting the Shooter's Manifesto, Tracing the Language.
And this brilliantly illustrates the primary piece of evidence the hosts are using to back up their whole thesis. They look at the chilling linguistic parallels between those alleged media labels and the assassin's own writings. Look at the quote on the right. "I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes." See that? The hosts are wrapping the exact phrasing from media talking points directly to the shooter's manifesto, basically arguing that he completely absorbed this specific framing to justify his plot. They also dive into the highly calculated nature of the plot itself, because this wasn't just some spontaneous thing. The shooter traveled multiple legs across the country, booked his hotel months in advance, and explicitly targeted administration officials. But, and the hosts make a pretty darkly funny observation here, according to the manifesto, he specifically exempted a Mr. Patel from his hit list. The hosts kind of joke that, hey, maybe the assassin just didn't want to come off as a bigot. But jokes aside, this meticulous preparation just underscores for the hosts how deeply this ideological framing had really set in.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 60 Minutes Exchange, a missed opportunity?
To show exactly how this rhetoric plays out on the national stage, the broadcast analyzes this deeply tense interview between Donald Trump and Norah O'Donnell on 60 Minutes. O'Donnell actually confronted Trump face-to-face with the assassin's chilling words. Just imagine the tension in that room as she read that exact quote out loud. "I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes."
While Trump's reaction was swift and furious. He immediately pushed back, telling her, "You're horrible people, you should be ashamed of yourself reading that, you're a disgrace." Now, interestingly, the Blaze TV hosts totally understood this fiery reaction. They pointed out that given the intense trauma of, actually surviving an assassination attempt, snapping at a reporter who is literally reading your would-be killer's words to your face, that is a perfectly human reaction.
But, and this is a big but, the hosts believe Trump missed a massive strategic opening here. They actually saw O'Donnell's question as a total softball. Instead of getting defensive and calling her a disgrace, they felt Trump missed a prime chance to just say, yes, that is exactly the incorrect stuff being fed to him by the left media. It was this golden opportunity, right? A chance to completely turn the narrative back around on the very media framing that they believe caused the event in the first place.
All right, Section 4, Media Delays and Bizarre Takes, the Cultural Fallout. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how bizarre the media landscape got immediately following the event. The broadcast highlights absolute bewilderment over TMZ's decision to reach out to John Hinckley, the guy who infamously shot President Ronald Reagan back in 1981. Why? TMZ apparently wanted his reaction to the recent attempt. The hosts mocked this relentlessly. They were essentially asking why on earth would anyone seek out an assassin's review of a shooting, comparing it to asking a descendant of John Wilkes Booth for his thoughts on a theater incident. And the cultural fallout just continued with these major scheduling shifts. The hosts define and point to the Imperial Presidency, that's a CNN documentary by Fareed Zakaria, which was abruptly delayed right after the assassination attempt, and the hosts found this sudden postponement deeply ironic. The whole implication being that the media had this program ready to go that heavily criticized the president, but then the sudden reality of actual real-world violence made airing those severe criticisms suddenly,
unpalatable.
To really encapsulate their view of this media double standard, the broadcast highlights a quote from a social media user that perfectly sums it up. It reads, "They keep having to delay programming on right-wing fascism because of left-wing violence." For the hosts, that observation just hits the nail on the head. It summarizes the huge disconnect they see between the narratives being pushed on TV and the actual violent events happening in the real world.
Let's move to our final section, Section 5. Examining extreme online voices, the case of Hassan Piker.
In this final thematic pillar, the broadcast turns its attention away from traditional news and points straight at specific online influencers, framing them as purveyors of incredibly dangerous rhetoric. They focus heavily on the left-wing streamer Hassan Piker. Now, keeping an objective view of the source here, the hosts rattle off a rapid-fire list of extreme accusations leveled against him. They claim he said Americans deserve 9/11, discussed the blood of capitalists, suggested shock collars for dogs should be hit until they smoke, and even implied taking out either the president or his dog. The hosts are bringing all this up to showcase the sheer volume of extreme rhetoric that just exists, completely unchecked online.
Bringing it all together, the hosts issue a broader, really stark warning. If you put this stuff out there, you're going to attract the kind of people that are going to do this. And that is really the ultimate takeaway from their analysis. Whether it's a polished anchor on a major television network or a streamer with millions of followers, they are arguing that unchecked political vitriol inevitably acts as a magnet and a catalyst for individuals who are prone to violence.
Which brings us to the end of our breakdown, leaving us with a truly vital question. Where exactly is the line between valid political critique and dangerous rhetoric? Think about it. We've traced the host's argument from the literal phrases used on television directly to a shooter's manifesto, through some incredibly tense interviews, and right down into the murky waters of online streaming. It is a profound tension at the very heart of modern media. I really hope this structured breakdown helped clarify these complex arguments for you. Keep this question in the back of your mind the next time you're scrolling through your feed or turning on the news. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.